I know, I'm bald. What the hell happened? Alright guys, welcome back to the Screen Squad. It's Kev. Today, going over the last couple episodes of The Acolyte, the first season, and what might be the only season, who really knows. Overall, the show was mid. Couple great episodes, including the finale, which was strong as can be. But we're going to start with episode 7, and in theory, this episode's approach was simple. Show the events of the season's earlier flashback episode from the Jedi's perspective, plus a bit more of May's side of things rather than Osha's, thus fully explaining exactly what occurred that left all the witches dead. In a broad sense, it did just that with some strong touches along the way, but the episode also left a lot of those events feeling needlessly complicated or convoluted, with some strange moments that still feel pretty unexplained. And not in a that's a cool plot thread for later kind of way. Instead, it feels like the audience is being asked to do too much of the heavy lifting for it to all make sense. The explanation of what exactly the Jedi's goals were was mostly pretty satisfying in the best part of the episode. It gave these events a lot more weight as we came to learn that Indara was the one trying to avoid conflict. Ultimately, she was trying not to interfere and leave Osha and May with the witches. And on the flip side, it was compelling to find out that Sol had become rather obsessed with trying to take the girls, convincing himself they were in danger in order to justify his intentions. His rogue intentions, if you will. The fact that he felt a connection to Osha and not May was effective and harshly underlined when, as the broken bridge was collapsing beneath them, he made the split-second choice, then again, that's what the episode was called, choice, to use the Force to only hold up Osha's side and save her, sending May to her death, except she somehow survived, of course. That's, Star Wars logic right there. In the midst of all this, though, was stupid dumbass Torben. I hated him in Game of Thrones as Tommen, not because he was just a bad character, but because he was such a pussy. And in this, he's just annoying, just like he was in Game of Thrones. Except he's got longer hair now, and for some reason thinks he has a purpose. But Torben went all in on helping Sol, not for interesting, complex reasons, but because he was just super duper homesick. That was probably the most annoying thing about him, seriously. But what a lame Jedi. Sure, he started out feeling this was an unimportant, boring mission, but then it actually turned out to be pretty freaking interesting with the witches and the rarity of virgins in the Force. Yet he still was just whining about missing Corzon. Torben, you suck. Honestly, worst character in this show. An odd aspect here was the sequence where we saw exactly what happened when Mother Anastasia possessed Torben and how she used his wish to go home to completely manipulate him. It created a nice parallel to Kamir's approach with Osha to have her take such a literally seductive tone with him. But nothing ever came of this interaction except to show us the witches could possess others, essentially just set up for Kalnaka being taken over later in the episode, which could have been done just as easily in the moment when Kalnaka attacked the others. But you could go down a rabbit hole and speculate that Anastasia wanted Torben to be so determined to leave that he'd help incite violence. Because, let's just say, perhaps she had some dark, big picture plan in mind. And the whole Kalnaka fight thing, why did they just show that when they initially showed up on Brendok? This all could have been done in one longer episode. The whole flashback episode, the first one. All the shit that they showed in this episode, they could have just put it together and made one longer episode and maybe shortened some of the scenes down. Because for a fan base that thought it was weird to have a Wookiee Jedi, at the same time, we're pretty excited to see what a Wookiee Jedi could do, only to have the guy killed off. But then in the flashback, you see him fight. I feel like it would have made more sense to show his fight before you show him get killed off. That's just me. But I truly don't think that's the case, and if it were, it would undermine everything we saw about Anastasia as the one more willing to put her feelings aside and let Osha go compared to Coral. Anastaea's death felt like it skipped over necessary beats. As is often the case with the Acolyte, the big picture idea is solid. Soul thinks Anastaea is doing something that may harm May, and so instinctively cuts her down with his lightsaber. But we're left wondering what Anastaea was actually going to do when she pulled that whole turning into black mist trick and began to float towards May, which got Soul panicking in the first place. Like, she might have just gone to push her out of the way, but with her dying breath, she tells Soul she was going to let Osha leave. Okay, great, but she could have let him know that before everything escalated. And was she just going to float over to May to say, calm down, how can I help? What was supposed to happen from Anastaea's perspective? Worse, the reveal of how all the other witches died felt so anticlimactic. And Dara used her force powers to break the hold the witches had over Kalnaka, and that just caused them to what? Drop dead? These witches had some pretty crappy force powers. Apparently, if that was how it works for them. And it was poorly convened, too. It wasn't even clear they were supposed to be dead rather than passed out when their connection Kalnaka was first broken, until we see their corpses later. The frustrating thing is, there was other good material in this episode. We got way more of an exploration of what a virgins in the Force is, building on the term that was first introduced in The Phantom Menace. Once more, there are a lot of explored parallels between the twins and Anakin, as they are all powerful beings whose birth did not occur in a natural, traditional manner. And learning that the concentration of the Force the twins exuded was able to bring back life to a barren planet effectively conveyed just how much unharnessed power a virgins can contain. It was also a great touch to reveal May and Osha aren't simply identical twins. They're essentially the same being split into two. This gives kind of a good retroactive explanation for Soul not realizing May was impersonating Osha. And showrunner Leslie Headland has talked about her hope for more seasons of the act, and revelations such as this demonstrate that there are enough elements at play to explore these things in a future season. The problem is, the finale just happened, and right now it doesn't feel like the show is honed in on enough of a specific focus for the impending ending. Right now, it just feels all over the place. Still, this episode helped bring more overall perspective to the Jedi during this era, and in the big picture of things, the Acolyte has shown the danger of how their rigid approach, and it's understandable some would push back against them. But this episode did help explain what happened with Osha and May. It was more about Soul and stupid Torben going on a misguided quest rather than anything the Jedi at large masterminded or condoned. And not only did Indara and Kalnaka never agree to Soul's plan, but we learned that when they were told the situation, the Jedi Council had decided the twins should be left alone. And for those worrying the show wouldn't just make things more complex in terms of the Jedi's place in the galaxy, it would paint them as more overt villains. This was kind of a relief. Also, that fight sequence between the possessed Kalnaka and Soul and Torben was well done. And not just because we finally got to see that Wookiee swing a lightsaber. It didn't match the heights of the comet in the 5th episode, but there were some cool and clever touches, such as Torben holding his lightsaber underhanded to block Kalnaka's death blow, or Soul not wanting to hurt his friend, turning his lightsaber off at the last second and using the metal hilt to hit Kalnaka hard in the head. Still, the overall feeling this episode exudes is frustration. Even the material, giving more context to May starting the fire, just felt silly and sloppy. It seems she didn't want to start a fire at all, just burn May's journal. Yet we still have to contend with May telling Osha, I'll kill you, right before that. And as seen in episode 3, did she mean she was going to fake her death in some way to keep the Jedi away? Maybe. If so, why not explain that both to Osha and the audience? I wish I had confidence we get more follow-up on that, but right now it just seems doubtful. Guys, I want you to think about the rather wacky series of events this episode tells us happened. Pretty much concurrently, still, this episode helped bring more overall perspective to the Jedi during the era. It was weird. It was very, I don't know how else to word it, but these flashback episodes just kill me. You could have done it all in one. If you gotta do flashback episodes, just do it. But The wacky series of events this episode tells us happened pretty much concurrently. May accidentally started a fire, which ended up spreading and causing massive explosions, destroying the witches' homes. Yet somehow the flames didn't kill anyone at all. Soul killed Anastasia because he didn't trust her and he had decided Ocean was safer with him. Again, not really his decision to make when the Jedi Council voted it down. All the other witches of Brendok died because they were collectively possessing the Jedi, and breaking that link hit the magic death switch for them all. But at least Soul killing Anastasia is interesting and adds to his character, even though it felt off and how that it actually occurred. But the other explanations don't feel satisfying or interesting at all, instead just creating a lot of silly coincidences. Lastly, I have to talk about that song. I'm guessing there's already some hyperbole online about the choice to end this episode with the song by Victoria Monet and how it ruins Star Wars forever. Whatever. And no, it didn't do that, but it certainly fell off. It's tricky figuring out how far you can push a previously established parameters to the format and still feel like it's Star Wars. We've now seen that you don't need an opening crawl, and you can add on-screen text identifying planets or include flashbacks among all sorts of things that never occurred in the early Star Wars films. But a pop song over the closing credits, it just doesn't sit right. But hey, who knows? Maybe in an alternate world, The Empire Strikes Back played a pop song over its closing credits, and bam, became an accepted part of the franchise. But that didn't happen. And now this, many decades in, it just felt super weird and out of place. And overall, it's just a wonky touch to end a wonky episode. There is one thing that did feel less frustrating, more of a normal laying the groundwork for the future touch in terms of unanswered questions, is what happened to Coral, who isn't seen again after she goes all black smoke. Clearly, she's still out there as a lingering threat and could possibly have had contact with Camille. She's also a possible explanation as to how May survived the big fall that Soul thought had killed her. And we learned the reason Brendok was previously devoid of life was because of a hyperspace disaster a century before. A nice bit of a reference to the High Republic novels and comics which covered that event in detail. And I think the director of the 2 Brendok episodes, Kogonada, is a very talented filmmaker, but he just doesn't seem to mesh well with Star Wars. The way he showed the witch's powers was especially cheesy, with it coming off laughable every time we cut to them all swaying in unison as they controlled Kilnaka. Since they didn't make the choice to end this episode with the pop song, they should have gone full 1980s movie title theme with it and called the song The Acolyte, not Power of Two. I never wanted us to fight, but you've turned into the Acolyte. The Acolyte finally revealed the truth about what happened on Brendok, but unfortunately it did so in a decidedly weak manner. Compelling revelations about Indara and Soul's differing intentions, what May and Osha truly are, and the line Soul crossed were undercut by a lot of silly and convoluted storytelling that diminished the impact of what was occurring. Also, between Torben's one and only motivation and the apparent actual reason for the witches dying, there was also a lot of dumb force use going on here. And that sums up episode 7, which I had a feeling it was going to lead a pretty entertaining finale. And holy shit, I was pretty blown away by that finale. As crappy as this show has been, and listen, I know there's a lot of people out there that are going to try and defend what Disney's doing with Star Wars, but you really can't. It's not what true Star Wars fans really know and love. Yeah, there's newer generation of people that parents raised them on Star Wars. They could like it, but as someone who's watched it, everything Star Wars that's been created, it's hard to get behind a show that deludes everything we love so much. But with that being said, we're going on to the finale now. It came to the Acolyte's first and only maybe season, came to an end with a busy finale that certainly made use of the 48-minute runtime. By the way, that's the season's longest episode. That's crazy to me. They could have told a much bigger story or fleshed it out better if they would have utilized long episodes. But it had a lot of big moments, some decent confrontations. It also set up a lot of elements for a far from guaranteed season 2, leaving a lot of questions unanswered in a way that's more frustrating than enticing. One story that is definitely wrapped up, though, is Souls. I'm sure by now a lot of you have watched this episode, but the final 2 episodes of the season cast this character in a very different light, revealing his foolishness, selfish acts on Brendock and how they led to him killing May and Osha's mother, plus the death of the entire coven. Last week's look at how this all played out was poorly told and highlighted in the flaws in the Acolyte storytelling. This week, seeing Soul away from that, yet still dealing with the aftermath, was more engaging. While he may harbor some regret, Soul is ultimately a stubborn as hell guy who can never admit that he was in the wrong, especially when it came to intervening with the Coven. It was an involving way to go with his seemingly noble Jedi, presenting a highly flawed character in a way that avoided him simply being evil. I also like that while May decided to spare Soul's life, the initial parallels to Luke throwing his lightsaber aside and refusing to kill Vader actually had a very different meaning here. It wasn't because May felt some sense of forgiveness or love for Soul. Instead, she wanted his guilt to be outed to everyone and for him to pay for his crimes in a way he'd have to endure. Elements like this meant May had some of her better moments in the finale as she came face to face with Osha, Soul, but her overall portrayal through the series still ultimately feels wildly inconsistent. Of course, Soul wouldn't be taken into custody after all. Osha kills him after hearing him confess to murdering her mother. And this was hardly a shocking event given the last few episodes had put her on the path towards making this dark side shift or turn, however you want to call it. But it actually felt like natural progression. And Soul essentially let her do it. While it initially seemed bizarre he wasn't fighting back, he did tell Osha it was okay, rather than using his own abilities to try and counter her force choke. Also, I loved this part. Seeing the Kyber crystal within the lightsaber Osha claimed from Soul. Like, they do this close-up on the crystal, and you watch it bleed and turn red as she made this decision. It was a really cool visual. The idea that Kyber crystals can change like this, it's an established concept. Though I'm sure there will be plenty of debates, arguments about why it didn't occur for Anakin's youngling killing lightsaber in Revenge of the Sith. Last week, I assumed May and Osha were the virgins in the Force, but it turns out they are instead a result of the virgins. That means we still don't know what the hell the real virgins is and how exactly the girls were created, especially since Coral, who presumably is still alive, didn't pop up again. One of many will deal with this in a potential season 2 aspects of this finale. Meanwhile, on Kamir's unknown planet, also known as Na'Akto, we see freaking Darth Plagueis. That's right. I said it. Darth freaking Plagueis. He's here, hiding in the shadows, being creepy as fuck, and I don't know why. It sure seemed like seeing him that's what was occurring as we saw this creepy, ghoulish figure who looked like some previous depictions of Palpatine's Sith Master. Watched Kamir and Osha from afar, but the finale offered no other details about him, and he didn't show up at the end, especially when Kamir and Osha return to the planet. You see them holding hands, and I don't know, but one can speculate that is Kamir's master, but we still don't exactly know what Kamir meant about wanting to harness the power of 2, nor how that plays into what this other guy's role is. We also don't know what his current dynamic with probably Plagueis is. Is Kamir still doing his bidding, assuming he once did? Did he leave this creep who has now stalked him to this planet? It's all uncertain. Like, does Kamir even know that Plagueis is watching him? Like, this all the strings being pulled by Plagueis. Ultimately, we have a mysterious source of power on Brendock and a mysterious source of power on this hidden planet but no real explanation yet for either, which feels too much at once. It feels like too much at once, even if his second season was already greenlit. Rather than Plagueis providing the season's concluding moment, much of the dramatic weight of the final moments instead rested on Vernestra and her outright lying about the actions of Soul. And she straight up named him as the one who killed all the other Jedi through the series, rather than May and Camere. This felt weird and muddled because Vernestra hasn't been fleshed out enough for this accusation to have any kind of weight. As is often the case on this show, you can feel the vestiges of a good idea here. Vernestra had been trying to protect the Jedi's reputation this whole time, and she thinks that putting all the blame on Sol's rogue Jedi is the way to do that. But we didn't really get to know her or feel the bond between her and Sol enough for this to have the punch it was meant to have. Vernestra was part of one standout scene, though, as she squared off with Senator Rayencourt, played by Supergirl's David Harewood. Strong debut, by the way. I love him, so seeing him in this, he wanted the Jedi to be investigated, and Rayencourt's reason for distrusting the Jedi, calling out their massive system of unchecked power and delusional belief that they can control emotions, were great, even though things got a bit too on the nose with how much he predicted the future when it came to a Jedi eventually losing control. However, bringing in Rayencourt at all at this stage was yet more blatant Season 2 setup at a time when there was already enough to deal with. One place the finale did get to shine was in its fight scenes. Combat choreography has frequently been a highlight of the Acolyte since the beginning, and the big lightsaber battle between Sol and Camere was another thrilling clash for the series. There were many awesome touches, from the pair's lightsabers cutting through the walls to the amazing moment where Sol used the Force to deflect two sabers that Camere had hurled at him. The hand-to-hand fight between May and Osha was also exciting and well executed, particularly considering there was one actress playing both sides of the fight, assisted by a body double and some VFX face swapping. Also, in a show that's had some sequences with notably weaker effects work than the Star Wars norm, the chase through the asteroid field was very cool. Obviously, we've seen asteroid fields in Star Wars action scenes before, but this one had its own distinct touch, as we saw all of that debris pushed aside in the wake of May and Sol's ship hurling forward. And given the sexy, flirty vibe between Osha and Camere that was established back in Episode 6, it was not out of nowhere to have them end the episode holding hands and holding Sol's corrupted lightsaber. I just wish the finale had spent some time more directly continuing that dark love story. There is something fun about having this potential dark side couple on a path to doing some serious bad things together in more ways than one. It felt like the finale could have better shown that part of their relationship throughout, rather than frame Osha's decision to become Camere's apprentice on being solely motivated by her wanting to help May. That stupid little tracker guy, Bazil, continued to be a very distracting, out-of-place element for the show, making goofy air-sniffing appearances that always undercut the tension of what was occurring. The way the final moments on Brendok were portrayed was so odd, as it felt like Bazil and the Jedi were right on top of May, Osha, and Camere for what seemed like a fucking eternity. Even as they had a long emotional farewell, Camere mind-wiped May. It seemed like they were acting far too casually in the midst of what should feel like a tense situation for all parties involved. And what exactly happened when Camere just vanished when he reached Osha's old home? Osha says they need to fix the elevator to get inside, and he says, "Are you sure?" Then just what? Teleports? Phases? Did he nightcrawler his way up there? Like, what was that? And that silent Yoda cameo at the very end felt pretty gratuitous and a bit like a hat on top of a hat. Especially after Plagueis had already popped up. I feel like that appearance would have been a more effective end of episode beat than Yoda. With that being said, one not as many people would understand. There have been a lot of strange and silly lines of dialogue in the Acolyte, but I'm trying to logic out Osha telling May, "Sol never blamed you. You tried to teach me that someone I love could be capable of this level of destruction." I know she goes on to say the problem is she couldn't keep her emotions in check, but Osha, what you just explained was he did blame May. He just told you to get over it. As expected, Camere was Vernestra's Padawan at one point, but did we get an explanation for why it seemed this occurred so long ago, given Camere's apparent age? Nope. They explained how May survived that giant fall as a kid. I was glad this wasn't ignored. Though as May told Osha what exactly happened that allowed her to survive, all I could think was, hey, this would have been a great thing to see one of the 2 episodes devoted to flashbacks that night. Inevitably, and this is another sad note about the show, Yord's Padawan, Tassi Loa, remained as forgotten as ever in the finale. For all we know, the season ended with her off on some planet, still unaware her master is dead. Maybe the Jedi just forgot to call her. I don't know. But the Acolyte's finale did have some notable highlights, such as some clever action set pieces, and its evolving depiction of Soul as a well-meaning but flawed man who just couldn't own up to the huge mistakes he'd made. But while Osha finally becoming the Acolyte, the show's title promised, made sense in the grand scheme, there were still moments that just didn't gel, and some moments that also felt clumsily told. And important elements like the actual explanation for Osha and May's conception were held off for a potential second season that may never happen. The Acolyte ended its season with some great action and a compelling depiction of a flawed Jedi Knight, but again left too many questions unanswered to be a satisfying conclusion. Overall, as a show, it was simply, again, leaving much of the story to be told in a season 2 that may or may not come. And if it doesn't happen, then this first season sort of seems like it was a bit of a waste of time, if that makes sense. Like, I understand what director Leslie Headland was trying to accomplish, but with the rumors of her wanting to lead the charge on a Knights of the Old Republic story, that still irks me to the point where my opinion is if they do a Knights of the Old Republic show or movie, I strongly hope that she is not even remotely attached to it. I just overall, I get what she was trying to accomplish. I just don't think she did that. The best moments of this were the bleeding lightsaber, Plagueis. I'll throw Yoda in because I was telling people from the beginning that Yoda's alive during this time period. He's definitely a Jedi. Where is he? Like, I know Grogu ain't around yet, but Yoda is alive. This is prime Yoda. He should have been in this the entire time. But with that being said, that's the end of season 1 of The Acolyte. Let me know what you guys think. Where do you think the story's going to go from here, if there is a continuation? I do know we got a few Star Wars movies coming out. Most notably, the first one will be 2026, I believe, or 25. I don't know. I'm just very worried for my favorite franchise, you know? And I'm sure a lot of you are too. Like, the best thing that they've done so far is Ahsoka. That's my opinion. Which Ahsoka was essentially Rebels Season 5, which is fine. We finally got a live-action Thrawn. You know, the Night Sisters being flushed out a bit. Just basically everything about Ahsoka was good. The potential of seeing Kanan Jarrus at some point would be incredible. I'm excited for season 2 of Ahsoka. I'm excited for the Mandalorian and Grogu movie that is happening. I do hope that at some point we get a Knights of the Old Republic that showcases Darth Revan, Darth Bane, you know, all the big Sith lords that we know and love from KOTOR. Yes, I'm a KOTOR guy. I said it. And yes, I'm bald. I know I said that at the beginning, but you guys are just going to have to get over that. It's too hot for hair. But with that being said, I'm Kev. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. Remember, I love the support we got so far. It's not a lot, but I'll take it where I can get it. If you see any of these videos, please drop a comment. Let me know where I can improve, what I could do better, what I don't do good. Also, please hit that subscribe button. It doesn't charge you money. Just hit subscribe. Help the Screen Squad get out there. Because who knows what the future holds. There's too much going on in this world to be able to cover everything, but I do what I can. Andy does what he can, too. And we're here to provide you guys with some epic entertainment. Maybe some bickering. You never know what you're going to get here. But until next time, this is Kev. Say, Bwah! Damn.